Well, good morning. My name is Stephen Legault, and today I'm going to introduce you to my most recent book called Taking a Break from Saving the World, a conservation activist's journey from burnout to balance. This book was published by Rocky Mountain Books in the spring, and it's my pleasure to speak with you today on behalf of Shelf Life Books and share with you a few thoughts on activism, burnout, our effort to try to save the world, and how we can make sure that we take steps to remain resilient and strong and healthy during this particular period of challenge and trouble globally. As you can see, I'm coming to you today from my writing studio in my backyard in Canmore, Alberta. To call it a writing studio might be a bit of a stretch. It's actually a 4-foot by 8-foot garden shed, which I tore apart, insulated, put a big window in, and rebuilt, and have named Summer Thought. It is a 3-season studio, and even this morning, coming out here on one of the very last days of August, I had to put the little space heater on to chase away the chill. I'm going to read to you for a few minutes and then give you a little background on the book. And again, I really want to thank the good people at Shelf Life Books for inviting me to do this, and of course my publisher, Rocky Mountain Books, for taking a chance on a bit of a unusual book for them to publish. Now, I always start with the author's caution. Everything in this book may be wrong. It's offered with the best of intent, but it's personal opinion and may be way out in left field. You've been warned. Preface. To burn out, you must once have been on fire. This is a book about what can happen when we spend our lives trying to make the world a better place, but overlook taking care of ourselves. People who are deeply engaged in the good work of saving the world, regardless of how grand or humble our efforts, can at times suffer from an inability to remain resilient. In plain speak, we burn out. If we're employed in the not-for-profit sector, this can lead to serious problems that can impact our careers. We may feel compelled to quit. We may get fired when our work suffers, and we may suffer from physical or emotional health problems. Despite increasing efforts by the organizations in the not-for-profit sector, when staff burn out, it can feel as if we're on our own. As the voluntary sector is oftentimes working right at the margins of its capacity to sustain itself, when one of our teams suffers burnout, the result can be the transfer of the workload and its accompanying anxiety to other teammates. As volunteers and grassroots activists, burning out can ultimately have the same outcome, but we may feel even more alone. The consequences can be very serious. The rate of suicide among those who identify as social profit employees or volunteers has long been a point of concern. And while statistics aren't available to compare the rate of suicide among activists with those in the greater society, numerous anecdotal examples exist. In March 2018, in a New York Times piece, John Ellington investigated the high rate of premature death among founders and activists from Black Lives Matter. With each fallen comrade, he says, activists are left to ponder their own mortality and whether the many pressures of the movement contributed to the shortened lives of their colleagues. I'm skilled at eluding the fetal crouch of despair, says Bill Mckibben, because I've been working on the climate change issue for 30 years. He writes this in the New Yorker magazine. I've learned to parcel out my angst, to keep my distress under control. But in the past few months, I've more often found myself awake at night with true fear for your kids' anguish. Mckibben, who's led the climate fight for more than 30 years now, says that despite the efforts of millions to address the climate crisis, the angst of emergency often wakes him at 2 a.m. to worry about our collective future. Long-term physical or mental health issues can and have sidelined some of the most promising activists striving for social change. This can have a lasting impact on their ability to live fulfilling, healthy, and rewarding lives. Aside from the personal impact of these challenges, the impact of burnout and its outcomes can be challenging for the management of organizations that are striving to make the world a better place. Loss of productive labor hours, high staff turnover, low morale, and toxicity in the workplace all take their toll. The cost to recruit and train new staff and the significant loss of institutional memory can be significant obstacles to the success of social profit organizations. People come and go from organizations that serve the cause of social or environmental justice, humanitarian needs, or peace, just as they do from more traditional forms of employment. There's conflicting data over the rate of employee turnover in the non-governmental organization or NGO sector, however. If I could say one thing to the new generation of activists, from the Sunrise Movement to Black Lives Matter to Idle No More, it would be this. It's a marathon, not a sprint. To survive such an endurance race, we have to face the effort to address the climate emergency, inequality, and the myriad crises of our generation. We have to pace ourselves. If we don't, we run the risk of great personal challenges, and we won't be around, continuing the struggle we feel so passionately about now. While our organizations have an important role to play in addressing burnout and its consequences, it's at the personal level that each member of the global activist community can make a difference. Learning to stay healthy as an activist often runs contrary to the self-sacrificing nature of those who are compelled to make the world a better place. I'm saying that sometimes we have to take a break from saving the world. Once in a while, regardless of how important our work is, and it is important, and the role it plays in defining the story of our own lives, we have to eddy out. To eddy out is a phrase coined by canoeists, kayakers, and other river runners. When you're paddling a river, especially one with rapids and other obstacles, sometimes you need to take a break in order to rest, scout the way forward, or just appreciate the majesty of the moving water. Unlike on a lake, you can't just pull over to the shore or drift quietly on calm waters. The current is pulling you downriver. To take a break, you have to look for an eddy, a spot on the inside bank of the river where a rock or maybe some other obstruction creates a sheltered section of water where the current is calm or even reverses direction and moves back upriver. The place where the water reverses course is called the eddy line, or sometimes the eddy fence. To cut the eddy fence, you aim the bow or the front of your boat into the top of the eddy. The paddler in the stern or the back of the boat paddles so that the boat turns sharply while the paddler in the bow digs in to keep the boat's momentum. Now, if you do it right, the boat swings gracefully around and you find yourself in quiet water. If you mess it up, however, you might get swept downstream, sideways, or backwards. Sometimes, if the eddy fence is particularly rough, you can even capsize. This is analogous to my own metaphorical experience eddying out. For most paddlers, however, it usually goes well, and once in the eddy, you can rest on quiet water as the river rushes by. This can provide a much-needed rest on a big river and gives you a chance to even step out of the boat and scout downstream for rapids, hazards, and more good, clean fun. So that's a little reading from Taking a Break from Saving the World, available at Shelf Life Books and most other fine booksellers here in Canada and in the United States, or available online. But I encourage people to support their local booksellers. Rocky Mountain Books, through their Facebook page, has a list of independent booksellers doing deliveries during this COVID-19 pandemic crisis, as well as stores that are now open to the public. A couple thoughts on taking a break from saving the world. In the book, one of the things that I stress is individual responsibility, both to prevent the kind of burnout that can sideline activists and to manage that burnout once it begins to set in, should you be so unfortunate. There's also an emphasis on teamwork, how to work within teams, to watch each other's back, to support one another, how to work with your supervisor, and then what to do in the event that you actually do succumb to some form of burnout. So things like exercise, diet, meditation are all incredibly important for maintaining good physical and mental health that's required in order to keep us strong and healthy for the work that we're doing. But there's also an emphasis on steps that we can take should we find ourselves at the very edge of that burnout precipice, where maybe we need to take a break and we've overlooked some of the signs and symptoms of that, which I do outline in the book. And then finally, I talk a little bit about how to eddy back in, because eddying out is important, taking a break, but knowing how to successfully and safely return to the current of the river to continue the good work that we do is important. Finally, I want to say this about these precarious times that we live in. It's never been more important for us to guard our own physical and mental well-being, because it's never been more important to have people working on the front lines of so many sectors to keep us safe and healthy. So in a couple of days, for example, kids are going to be going back to school, and I would consider all the teachers and support staff and administrators in those schools to be doing the good work of saving the world, because they are ensuring future generations of Albertans and Canadians and people around the world have the education that they need in order to meet the challenges that we face today. Of course, healthcare workers are paramount in my mind these days. People on the front lines of the pandemic who are working selflessly in support of their communities need to know that it's okay to take a break, to step aside, to rest, to recuperate, to get some perspective, and then eddy back in. And then finally, all over North America right now, here in Alberta, where we face unprecedented challenges to our natural environment, to our healthcare, to our education system, as well as other jurisdictions in Canada, and of course with my friends and colleagues across the United States, so much of what we love is under attack. And it has been under attack for a long time now. And what I urge people to do is to maintain perspective by doing the things that are necessary to remain healthy, to support one another when our colleagues falter, and to ensure that we remain healthy in our own work for the long run. Because as I said, the work that we're doing is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So again, I want to thank Rocky Mountain Books for publishing Taking a Break from Saving the World. I want to thank Shelf Life Books for allowing me to join with you and talk a little bit about the book. And I want to thank all of you for taking a few minutes to listen in, to share with me some of the challenges and thoughts that you've had. I get notes and correspondence from a lot of people, and I welcome that. Grab a copy and share it with friends. Give it to somebody that you think might need it. Borrow it from the library. Do what you can to make sure that you balance your lives and the work that you're doing so that you can stay healthy and resilient for the long run. Thanks again.